Hi, my name is Areej Khan. I'm currently based in Dubai. I'm a computer science educator. This video cast is called Here Areej. This is my fifth episode of the video cast. It is usually called a podcast, but I've ensured I've made it more accessible to those with a hearing loss. I've ensured there's PSL available, Pakistan Sign Language, and I've also made sure that there's captions available below. So if you need the captions, please feel free to turn the captions on below. This way we have all the visuals provided by Connect Here. Connect Here provides all the interpretation and the captions below. So I partnered with them, and I'm very, very excited to introduce you to a very good friend of mine. But before that, I hope you all are well wherever you are in the world. And I'm so excited to introduce you to Jess, who's based in Alabama in the United States of America. She's a very good friend. She's a physiotherapist and a deaf blogger. Now let's bring her on. Hi, Jess, how are you?
I'm doing good. How about you, Areej?
I'm good, thank you. So what's the time there right now?
11 p.m. over here. And thank you so much for having me on here today. I'm really excited to be here and to see you again.
Me too. I'm so excited. I mean, last time it was you interviewing me, and now this time it's me interviewing you.
Full circle.
Full circle, yeah. And as you can see, it's like daylight here, and I think it's very dark down that end of the world.
I got my ring light.
I've got the ring light too, just to make sure that, I look a bit more flawless.
Just things that deaf bloggers do, right?
I think all bloggers have to do that.
That's true. That's true.
So, how was your trip to California? You were in California recently.
I did. I visited a friend of mine that is also deaf with cochlear implants, and she's a few years older than me. And my husband went with me, and we had a great time just seeing the town and the sights and seeing the Pacific Ocean. It was sunshiny. The sun was shining the whole time. So that was really nice, as it would have been raining a lot here recently. So no rain, warm weather is my cup of tea.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And then you obviously it wasn't too hot, but you could go to the beach, right?
Yeah, it was breezy, chilly, like high 60s, and then maybe high 40s at night, where a light sweater was okay. The wind could get a little bit chilly, but it felt good to me. It was great.
Oh, that's nice. I just wanted to remind everyone that if you want to put the captions on, they can turn the captions on Facebook. So I just wanted to remind you guys of that again. So I'm so excited to introduce my audience to your hearing loss journey, and then possibly you mentioned to me in the past that your husband is hearing. So hopefully in this conversation, we're going to go through some questions around being in a relationship with a hearing loss, and also being in a relationship with someone who's hearing, because I feel like maybe someone who's deaf as well, they might understand exactly what you're going through, but when it's someone hearing, there's a big like communication gap there, and like how to work on that. But in real honesty, any relationship, any marriage, there are communication issues there. So hopefully that advice will like benefit anyone and everyone. So let's get started. So please tell me a bit about your hearing loss journey.
All right, so I was born completely deaf, and my parents did not figure out that I was deaf till I was around 4 to 6 months old. And then I went through some diagnostic testing, which diagnosed me as moderately severely deaf, and I was actually diagnosed with an adult audiologist. So it wasn't till I was close to 1.5 years old that my parents found out that I actually had been misdiagnosed and that I actually had profound severe hearing loss. So at that point in time, I was wearing hearing aids and going through spoken language with the intent to go back and learn sign language if spoken language had failed for us. So once they figured out and realized, I was making very good progress with my hearing aids and spoken language, my parents realized that I was not hitting certain barriers and we took a trip to Pennsylvania, and that's where I was with a special team at Helen BB Center that figured out that my diagnosis was incorrect to begin with. And then due to deaf policy and deaf culture in my state, when my parents found out that I was born deaf, they were told that their only option was to send me to the school of deaf and to sign only. And that was my only option, and that was it. And my parents wanted to raise me in their home first and try that route first. So they did their own research, and learned that there was a possibility of using hearing aids with spoken language, and they had heard about cochlear implants, but because at the time we didn't think I was deaf enough to so speak for cochlear implants until that we went to Pennsylvania, then they found out that there was a cochlear implant center in the South nearby where I lived. And then we joined that cochlear implant center to see if I was a candidate, and I ended up being a candidate. So I got my first cochlear implant when I was 2.5. And then I got my second cochlear implant when I was 10 years old. So I was the first child in Alabama to become bilateral. And we estimate around the top first 50 in the US at the time. And that was in 2003 when I got my bilateral cochlear implants done. So as you see, I mainly am spoken. That's my preferred choice of communication. I did take some ASL for fun, but I'm not fluent. So it's one of my bucket list items that I would like to learn more and be a bit more immersed into sign a little bit, just to use both. But the thing is, I'm glad to be able to speak well and be mainly spoken, since my job as a physiotherapist requires my hands. I do a lot of manual with my patients, which would just make communication very hard for us both. So that's just a little bit about my journey with hearing loss. That, it was a little bit adverse at first because there's a lot of adversity, because just due to misinformation that we had received, and we were told that we did not have certain options. So that's one of the things I'm very passionate about. My platform on my Instagram is just advocating. And I do advocate for cochlear implants and spoken language, but I'm okay with all options. I just want people and parents who find out their child is deaf to know all their options. So I love what I do. I love meeting my other friends who are deaf and hard of hearing, connecting and empowering one another, because, for a while I was ashamed of my disability because I felt like I didn't fit in, because I was rejected by my deaf culture. I wasn't deaf enough for them. But then I also was too deaf for my hearing culture too. So in the US, a lot of my friends and I who are deaf and hard of hearing, we joke and we call ourselves that we are in-betweeners, because sometimes we're not fully deaf or fully immersed in the deaf culture, but we're not fully part of the hearing culture either. So it's been it's been a life journey of, that I've really enjoyed, just figuring out how my identity is not, in my hearing loss 100% in my deafness, but it's a part of me and who I am. And it's something I should be proud of, that, that by God's grace for me, and that my life journey and just perseverance and diligence and hard work, that, I'm the person that I am today. So that's just a little bit about me and my story.
Of course, that's brilliant. I mean, hats off to your parents for, even going out and getting that extra support, and not just deciding to put you straight into a deaf school or anything like that, and seeing what is available out there, and just keeping you home at home for a while until they could figure out what the right path is for you.
Yes.
Because it's quite easy that, okay, this is what my child is, and I'm going to put them there because someone's saying they should go there, and then just forget about it and not even want to bother to look at other options and see what's available. I think you meant, are you the eldest child in your family? Yeah.
Yes. So the unique fact about my family, my whole family is hearing except for me, my brother, and my sister. We all have the same hearing loss gene. We have connexin 26 hearing loss, GABA beta junction is the specific type. So basically, our genetic mutation is where the cilia should be alive in our cochlea. We do not have the cilia, or our cilia is not healthy. So sound travels through our ear and just stops at the cochlea. So the cilia is responsible when stimulated, it activates the auditory nerve, which is how people hear. But since we don't have the hair cells in our cochlea, our sound just stops there. So I have sensory neural hearing loss.
Oh, wow. And that is where the gap was in your diagnosis earlier as well. The fact that they didn't actually spot that.
Yes, they suspected based on our family history, and we did genetic testing later after my sister was born and confirmed that was the type. By that point, research had improved with understanding after especially the explosive, the DNA genome research they did, they were able to do a lot more genetic testing. So we were part of those trials to figure out the type of genetic hearing loss we had.
So you're the eldest, and then how many siblings come after you?
And then my brother is younger, and my sister is the baby of the family. And we all have biological cochlear implants.
Yeah, and then it's your parents who are hearing.
Yes.
Is there anyone, so this genetic diagnosis, is it because someone senior in the family had it, or is it because of some combination between your parents that created it?
It's suspected that somebody along the line of our family ancestry had hearing loss, but our gene is recessive. So that usually when you have a recessive gene, and correct me wrong if you geneticists out there, but my understanding is if you have a recessive gene, usually you're a carrier until you meet a partner or you choose to engage and have a partner who may have the exact same recessive gene. Then the chances, so you have to have 2 recessive matches to have a child who may have that diagnosis. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, my biology is like terrible. I took biology.
I love biology.
I'm terrible with it. So, and that's why I failed biology when I went on to my A levels. At one point in my life, I was like, I want to become an audiologist and I want to help people with, hearing loss. It's always been something I always wanted to do, but I was terrible with biology, and that's why I just can't get my hands around anything to do with the body or anything. So I'm just like, it's not my thing.
Versus that's my job. So I love biology, physiology, anatomy. So hey, power to each of us. We have our own things we love. So
I'm more about the computer, which is something I can see, understand, less parts, less things going around. Yeah, I can work on this. So that's quite interesting. And I'm sure you, as you mentioned, you had you were in betweener. You didn't fit into the deaf culture. You didn't fit into the hearing world, and I feel like that relates to a lot of people, and it certainly relates to me because we had a deaf community in our school, and suddenly, because I spoke so well, instantly the moment you speak and they start signing to you and you don't sign back to them, it's like a heartbreak instantly. That like, oh my god, like no, she's not deaf. She's not one of us. She doesn't have a hearing loss. And when you go out in the hearing world and you're constantly asking people to repeat for you, they're like, they just give you a bit of a weird look sometimes, but most of the time I think people becoming more aware of these things and knowing that you just need to repeat. So yeah, I certainly think a lot of people fit in with that, but I'm sure there were other challenges that you faced as well. Are there any that come to your mind?
What you said pretty much, that I was stuck between 2 worlds, and I did learn some sign around 3rd grade, age 9 to 10 for me, and I do retain some of it. I'm able to start a conversation. I just can't finish and maintain more complicated conversations. That makes sense. But so I was also mainstream. So I was in a school system where I did not have any friends that were deaf or any other individuals that I knew who were deaf, except for my brother and sister who went to the same school as I was. So my experience of deaf culture growing up were the experiences where it was more hostile towards me, but it was very older adults. And I did not meet anybody my age yet because I didn't know that there was anybody around with me with who had hearing loss or who was deaf or had cochlear implants or hearing aids, any of the combo. And it wasn't till I got to college that there were a couple of girls on my college campus that had cochlear plants and had been part of the deaf school and everything. So that was where I started understanding a bit more about deaf culture. And because they were also kind of in betweeners, but because they could sign, they were more accepted by their deaf culture. And it was really great to engage with them and everything. But because I was mainstreamed, I was surrounded by all hearing people only. So I always dealt with the challenges of that my friends accepted me as their own because they loved me for me and accepted me for their friendship and everything. We were great friends. And I'm thankful for that because that support always helps. But then at the end of the day, if I was in a group conversation and they would just be talking really fast between each other, and I'd be like, hey, what are y'all talking about? Trying to be a part of the conversation. And I would always get like, never mind, we'll just tell you later, that kind of thing. And that's just always the most frustrating thing just to get as when you're stuck in between two worlds. Because, I feel like you, me both, we hear pretty well of our devices, but it's not perfect. It's technology. It's here to assist us, but no technology is ever going to be perfect, and that's where I need that grace too, to know that it's not always to be perfect and I need some of that help. And so when I'm asking you for help, it's not a bad thing. It's just how my life is. So that's just things I think back to that I struggle with. And then of course, I think there's always gonna be bullying sometimes just because girls are mean. And then sometimes, and I find bullying doesn't happen because people are mean, but because people are often insecure about themselves. So if you're very confident about who you are, and people also don't know how to handle people with disabilities, regardless of the type of disability. So when people are really insecure about themselves and can't handle the type of, or know how to handle being friends with someone with disability, the insecurities kind of come through. And so I had to learn from a young age that, to not let their insecurities get the best of me and just to continue to be who I am and to be proud of who I am, and that it was okay to be different, but, being different is pretty awesome. So those are just some of the challenges that I remember facing as a kid and as an adult at times. I'm thankful to work in a job where my bosses knew me before I went to graduate school. So it was pretty easy for me to transition into it. But I know deaf peers of mine, friends that are also physiotherapists that are having to face some challenges of advocating for themselves first before they go to their clinical sites and stuff to make sure their teachers and mentors help understand that they may not catch everything all the time, but it doesn't make them a lesser or a worse PT, if that makes sense, because we're very capable. But again, it goes back to even when we talked about last time together, advocacy all the time. And advocacy is empowering. It really is. And that's what you have to do, especially with hearing people. And it also is true for, dating with relationships. You have to advocate yourself in all types of relationship, whether your partner is deaf or hearing or communication modes. But I typically find you have to advocate a little bit more extra when you're engaged with people who are just hearing only. So
yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I was just thinking that it is hard, sometimes just trying to constantly advocate for yourself, and it can get so exhausting and overwhelming. And I think sometimes no one really understands that. And you're right, with regards to the bullying, it mainly comes out of someone else's insecurities. When someone is dealing with something and not happy with themselves and not confident, they usually lash out and take it out on the other person. That, oh my God, like this person's maybe deaf or whatever disability they have, and they're so happy. Like, why am I not happy? But it should usually have that positive effect. But sometimes I feel like people are so like stuck within themselves negatively that it's hard for them to see it that way. And like you said, girls are mean. So I went to girls only high school and they were mean. They're really mean. Like I got bullied throughout high school and all sorts of things. Like there would be times where it would be like lunch break and they would just want to mess around. They just want to bully people. That was like their hobby. And I would sit there and have my food, and they would just stand behind me and start swearing. And I wouldn't be able to make up, but obviously I know that they're, or for a joke, they'll start shouting out my name and I won't hear. And then everyone will, it'll turn into a bit of a comedy show. And like looking back at that, and I'm like, oh my God, like it's insane. And things like that are still happening. And this kind of message needs to go out there. I mean, the kids, yes, but no one deserves to be made to feel that way. And I mean, growing up, just like you said, it took a long time for me to accept that being different is okay. You know,
and it could be empowering. Different. It could be a powerful thing. It could be an powerful tool. And I think, I think that's also bad karma and also the devil's way of trying to take us down in life when we have a disability, especially whether your religious or spiritual beliefs may be. I think there's always something bad karma-wise in the universe. And sometimes that manifests in other people, whether they don't realize at the time that they are manifesting that. And because the last thing that, good karma wants, and that, for me, Jesus really wants, is that, me to be dragged down by the way he created me, and let others think about, they could bring me down and think that being different is bad. That makes sense. But the reality is it's a beautiful thing. And I think my life is beautiful in the sense of, I have lots of great stories. I have lots of great friends of different backgrounds and different cultures. And that I've just have had the real joy and pleasure of getting to know and be friends with, and to learn where life's just more colorful. It's just not black and white, but that's the nice thing about being into Twitter. We really get the color of the world. We don't, because we're not on one side fully or we're not on the other side fully. We're in this good middle, and we get to see it all on both sides. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a different perspective, and only we understand what that perspective is, because still there's no method or way of people knowing what it's like to be us. Only if you are us, then you will know what it's like to be us. Like I can't say switch that tune off or turn that sound off or stop hearing these certain sounds. You won't. You can't do that. There's no way of being able to do that, to be able to understand what we go through. And yeah, it is beautiful, but I think it takes a lot of maturity to get to that point. So for children, I mean, there is a lot of immaturity, and even today there are some adults that are so immature, and instantly that, okay, no, this is not someone I want to associate with. You don't understand what I'm going through, and I can't communicate that to you, and you're not willing to understand, or you're embarrassed about it. So it's okay. I just know that I need to cut you off. But as a child, it's very hard to do that, because you want to be accepted, you want to be involved, you want to be around people. So it can be very challenging.
It's human nature, like we talked about this whole coronavirus. Like we met each other over social media because, while the whole world was shut down, publicly at least, people sought out other ways and means to create bonds and friendship, because that's just our natural human instinct, is to want to be wanted by others and to have bonds with others and friendships. And we're going to often look for those bonds in places of people we relate well to. So I think that's one of the coolest things I've seen this whole past year as a deaf blogger. I was trying a little bit, but it really did blow up until the last year, I think, for any of us, because we all found each other. That makes sense, So.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I keep thinking that. I'm like, I don't think I would have met you unless it was probably a pandemic, which is a bit crazy to say, but it just pushed us all online. And then we started looking and, socializing online and finding people like us that, oh, wow, there might not be someone down the road that's like me, but there is someone across the world and I can connect with them. And there's technology, there's video calls. Suddenly all these light bulbs start to appear, which is amazing.
It is amazing for sure. So, but I'm thinking back to also what you're saying, it's a maturity thing with children. And that's where I think it's our responsibility as younger deaf adults and most of the new generation of deaf in a way, because I feel like all of us across the spectrum are so much more accepting of each other and our choices, because that's what's best for us in our lifestyle, whether it's a blend of sign and spoken language, spoken only, or just sign only, or assistive technology, whatever they choose. We're so much more accepting across the whole spectrum, that I really think we have the power to change our generation and to teach parents how to teach their children and empower their children for future generations of their children who are deaf, but also to teach parents who are hearing with hearing children how to interact and work and be friends with children, that just have a disability, because, while we have a disability, we're no different. We're still humans at the end of the day. That makes sense. So I'm really excited to see where the next decade goes, maybe forth. That makes sense. So.
Of course, yeah, I'm totally excited, and I can see that we're really starting to build a foundation on making that change, which is fantastic. So I'm really excited for the future generation, and I'm hoping that no one will ever have to experience a lot of the challenges that we went through. So just moving on to the next point. So I just wanted to share some of your experience, because like I mentioned earlier, that you're married to someone who is hearing, and any relationship advice that you may have for someone with a hearing loss.
So relationship advice. So for me, I met my husband through my roommate, who is my sister-in-law. So it did help me some that I didn't know my husband as a friend first, but to be honest, the same rules applied to him as the other guys I date who are hearing. I did not date anybody else who was deaf or hard hearing because, like I said earlier, I really was not surrounded by anybody or any other men. My preference is men because I'm a she, her. That's what I identify as gender. So for me, my preference, dating wise, was what I was surrounded with, and what I cared about when I was looking for dating was, was he a good person and a caring person, and I just never ended up dating anybody who was deaf or hard hearing just because there wasn't anybody around me, and so, but anyways, but the first thing that I remember from day one, just even with my husband in the early stages of dating, is we talked often about how my hearing loss journey was and how I had to adapt. And he started to see slowly how I had to adapt and how he had to adapt too. So my biggest relationship with that is, don't be afraid to tell your partner, whoever you're dating, that, share them about your hearing loss and everything. And help them understand in simple ways of what you need, because often your partner just wants to know what you need and how y'all can have a healthy relationship, because it's not a healthy relationship if you can't be honest with each other what your needs are with each other. And that's just going to create a disaster. Now, on the flip side, whenever I meet somebody for the first time, let's start that, because I know a lot of my friends who are deaf and hard hearing have a lot of challenges when they meet somebody for the first time and telling them like, okay, I really like this person, but they haven't figured out yet that I'm deaf or hard hearing. And I still think the same thing holds to be true, is to be honest with them, and to be honest, if they reject you, they're a jerk. I'm just going to say, because, that means they're not going to really, truly invest in you and be mature and want to grow a healthy relationship with you if they're not willing to be open and to be open-minded and to be willing to grow together. That makes sense. And I think there's nothing that drives couples more apart than when you can't be honest with each other and can't respect each other's needs and can't respect each other's communication needs even. So for example, my husband knows I work all day with patients, and that's where it's really hard for me to hear sometimes during the day, especially with the mask, because I'm not able to lip read anymore. So one of the big things I do when I come home is I cook in silence for 10 to 15 minutes for my husband. And he respects that because he knows I need that silence. So I know we talked about the noise in the kitchen, but so I don't want to deal with more noise, but for me, he respects that I need to unplug just for a little bit, so that way I'm able to have a conversation, because my husband doesn't sign. He knows a couple of signs. So for example, if I'm standing right here and he's behind me and I can't hear him, he knows he can come up to me very gently and he'll lightly tap my shoulder. So that way I can hear him, or when I say hear him, I'm lip reading him. Or if he's sitting on the couch and I turn, use my visual field, he'll wave at me and like use his visual singles and stuff. So that's just like things that, our marriage looks a little different on that site versus somebody who may be hearing, you can be in another room and call that person. And he's done it before where he's called me from another room and then I don't respond at all. he has to come find me. So, but it's just things like that, because we were honest with each other day one, and he recognized, and he was always okay with knowing that our lives would look a little bit different. But he chose me not because I'm different because of my hearing loss, but because of who I am as a person. And honestly, if you're a person that you want to be with and dating with or destined to be with, doesn't, accept you for you and all of you, the good and the ugly, and your disability both. And, not that disability is ugly at all, but it's challenging and it's hard. And if they're not willing to work through the hard, then I just don't think they're worth your energy. So that's just me saying, be powerful,
Yeah,
so.
no, definitely. And I agree with what you said there, that the disability doesn't define you, but it makes you who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So as you said, your husband didn't marry you because you're different because of your disability, but because of who you are. Mm-hmm. But in a way that makes you who you are. And would you have any other way, if you could go back without having hearing loss, would you ever take that option?
No. And I get asked that a lot, but to be honest, it's like I was saying earlier, I feel like my life is really full of a lot of color and a lot of variety and just a lot of beauty, because I have a lot of unique experiences that I wouldn't want to trade for. So
yeah. Of course. And so you mentioned that you come home and you unplug for a moment and you just cook in silence, yes. And that's like your therapy. And so would you just cook yourself and then afterwards put your implants on? Is that also to do with the sound in the kitchen, or it's just for you to like have a break from listening?
Just to have a break from listening, just because I was just really wiped out and very exhausted by the end of the day, because it takes a lot of mental concentration, and I think that's the reality. I make a good point with that. With deaf and hard of hearing people, is regardless of your mode of language and communication, it takes energy for us to use that communication. It's not as free flowing energy. And that's one big piece of advice I actually give to my friends who've been in relationships with the same person for a while, and they felt like they have a hard time explaining to their partner why they're so exhausted at the end of the day and get guilty or get guilted by their partner. I'm like, you need to explain it to them that it's an energy thing. I laugh. I use the iPhone battery analogy all the time, but I find it works with my patients and stuff. So we all have iPhone batteries as humans, So we start with our day after a good night's rest at 100%. All right. And as soon as I put my device on, I'm already slowly going to 80% because now I'm having to use energy to listen. I go to work and I work about 5 to 6 patients that morning. And by lunchtime, my coworkers may be at 50%. And I'm already a little bit below 50% because I have to work a little bit harder to communicate, especially with the mask. So if I get a chance, I unplug at lunch, which boosts my battery up to a little bit to 50%. And then I work a little bit more. And by the time I get home, I'm hanging at 20%. I'm reaching that red zone. So if I don't unplug, I'm not going to be able to catch up. So if you turn around and tell me that we're going to go to a loud restaurant with gathering with friends, and I don't get a chance to unplug for a minute, and I could do it. But if I don't get a chance to go somewhere and kind of withdraw, and I think that's the compensation mechanism we have a lot. We often withdraw because, and people think we withdraw because we're introverted, but we're not. We just, as you can tell, I'm very extroverted. I like to say I'm an introverted extrovert because at some point my battery crashes before your battery does. So I find that the battery analogy works. And that's one analogy I recommend that people use. And for some reason, once people hear that analogy, and I've had a couple use that to their partners or spouses, and it just made sense. They're like, okay, it's not that you're angry at me or you're trying to push me away or withdrawing from me. You just legitimately need a break for a minute. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally relate to that, but I find that there's a time when you have to unplug to recharge before you unplug to fall asleep. There's 2 different types of unplug. There's one unplug, which I have, which is if you unplug and you're extremely exhausted, you would just start to fall asleep. Like, I don't want to put that back on. I don't want to hear, I'm gone. I'm disconnected now and I can't reconnect. I'm done. But there's a time where you can just unplug and then unplug back in. It's like, after this, I'm going to unplug.
Yes.
And I'm just going to sit by myself, do whatever I need to. It's the weekend here. But if it's late at night, I can't replug. It's just that connection's gone. I'm like knocked out. And
like after this, I will be in that unplugged mode. I'm going to have a beautiful night of sleep tonight.
I love how we're using the analogy to, explain that. And I think it's going to stick with me. It's a really interesting way to put it.
I find it helpful. I think we're so visually driven sometimes, and we just love stories, regardless of the type of way we hear story. But I think sometimes just finding visual representations or just wording, that just makes sense, just helps understand and help explain to people who are hearing, especially. So that's something I use because my patients ask me often how it works to have a hearing husband. And they see, sometimes where I have to ask them to repeat what they say because of the mask, and they're very patient, very kind with me because they first meet me as their therapist. And, the first time I meet my patients, they don't know that I'm deaf right away on that first treatment. And I don't tell them until the very end of the treatment, like, hey, if I tell you something and ask you to repeat something for me, know that it's not you, it's me. I actually was born deaf. I work a couple months to hear. So just know that. But by that point, I've kind of proved it to them that I can do very well with my communication mode. So there's a possibility, if you meet someone for the first time, you could consider even doing something like that, on your first date, like just let the first date go. Or if they see your device, be like, hey, I have something cool to share with you. This is how I interact with the world. But I'm excited to meet you tonight, because if you come across very confident and very sure of yourself, they're not going to question that.
Of course. But that's the thing. It's exhausting having to prove yourself, and you have to remember to do that.
Yes.
And going back to relationships, do you ever find that there are moments where you think you might, the early stages, once you're married to someone and you've been with them for a long time, it's different. But in the early stages, you worry that you might be a burden on them? Because
I think it's a natural instinct, sometimes, and there's times that I feel like even my own marriage, my husband, that I'm like, okay, I hate that I have to ask him a lot. And that often correlates to when my hearing cochlear point map is not fine-tuned. I'm due to see my audiologist, and I can see where it frustrates him, but I'm very thankful to have a partner that's very patient with me. So I do think it is finding the right partner sometimes, but I usually find what happens is when I'm in that position where I feel like I'm a burden, it's because I've stopped asking for help. And sometimes if you have a partner that's really healthy and you're in a healthy relationship, they just want to know what they can do to help. That makes sense. And sometimes just having that conversation, be like, hey, look, I know I'm not hearing super great, or I'm just not communicating well. Can we figure out some strategies just for you to communicate better? And that creates a good pathway to the conversation, because you're never a burden. Having hearing loss is hard, but I hope people take away from our conversation, it should not be viewed as a burden because, it is a heavy load. But when you have the right people that surround you, whether it's a life partner or friends or family, they're not going to view it as a burden because they view it as something, it's a part of you and it's part of the package. That makes sense, but it's not a bad package because it's awesome in a way. You know what I mean? That makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. Do you ever find that, when you guys are having an argument, do you ever have the tendency to just unplug? Be honest.
True story. I do as a joke now, but let's say there was one time I was mad enough. I looked at him and I told him, I'm not listening to you anymore. And I physically took my implant off, slammed on the counter, and walked out of the room. And he just looked at me and was like, I don't know what to do with this.
Because it's so easy.
Very sassy.
Yeah, no, but it's so easy to do that. But I think obviously, if it's someone who's very patient, like you were saying, like the person someone with a hearing loss should be with has to be very patient, whether they're deaf, whether they're hearing, whatever it is, the number one important characteristic has to be patience, because we will ask you to repeat things, and if you're not okay with that, then good luck to you. We don't need people like that in our life, and that's even when we're choosing our friends as well. We make sure that our friends are patient as well. So
I feel like a lot of things similar. There's a lot of similarities, you know what I mean? So
yeah, exactly. And then if if you're having an argument and suddenly you just take it off, it can be seen as funny, and then it can kind of dissolve the argument. I think it's like, oh my God, like, okay, like this is getting a bit too far, and you can just break it down.
I think it depends. One time it wasn't the right thing. But yeah, I think it's a personality thing. I'm a very fiery, hot temper personality. I don't like to take no for an answer. I will fight you. I will fight you. So, we were both in fight mode. That's just our personality. But I think every couple, regardless of the type of couple, if it's deaf or hearing or hearing, you're always gonna have some type of competitive anger stance that y'all both take that you have to resolve, and you may have to do a little bit different, and that's just part of going back to that open conversation and being open and communicating with each other about how you argue and how you engage each other and how you view fights. And it may differ a little bit if you are with especially a partner who is deaf or hard hearing, because like I said, my tendency is to have that withdrawal response. When I get overwhelmed by stimuli, I don't want to deal with listening. That makes sense. So I can kind of shut off, which can sometimes make people I've had having friends more mad because they're trying to pull me out. That makes sense. So again, communication styles,
Of course. And I think I do exactly the same thing, that I'm just like, okay, I'm going to withdraw myself from the situation. I'm going to think about it. And me being a Libra, I'll get advice from everyone before I actually go and give a response on what I'm going to do in the situation.
So you're a Libra?
Yeah.
I'm a Scorpio.
Okay. And do you ever find that you have to think it out, plan out, and get the opinions and stuff sometimes? Because I don't know much about Scorpios.
Oh no. We typically just tend to be very fiery and angry people all the time. Apparently our sign is dark and angry, so we joke.
Okay, ours is like the balance scale, so we try a bit of everything.
I don't really believe in it, but I just thought it was just kind of funny because I know Libras balance everything, but I just joke. So I'm Scorpio, my husband's Sagittarius, the next sign, because we have the same birthday month, but our birthday split by the calendar. But anyways, I'm more into the Enneagram. That's my thing. Some people think I'm a 9, and some people think I'm an 8. And the 8 is the angry number on the Enneagram. So, because we always want to fight for justice, and the 9 is the peacemaker. So I feel like I'm stuck between those two worlds where I want to fight because I don't like to have conflict in my life, but I don't want to address the conflict because I want to keep the peace in the relationship. So again, I think it goes back to that whole communication styles thing. That makes sense. And whether you like to follow your star sign or like more psychology stuff or your religion, a lot of things hold this true for the same any type of healthy relationship. It's all about that healthy communication. So
of course, communication is key to any relationship, honestly. If you can't be open and honest with that person and communicate your needs and explain how you're feeling and come up with a solution, because I'll be honest with you, with every single relationship problem, there is a solution. There is a solution. There's a way. You're two people. There's your side of solutions. There's that person's side of solutions, and you just kind of need to agree on one. And sometimes that agreeing part can be the difficult job because of ego and stubbornness, and that's where things get very difficult and complicating. But just before we start to wrap up, is there any final advice that you would like to share today?
I guess I will wrap up. So obviously we talked a lot about communication. So I just want to encourage y'all, don't be afraid to communicate your needs, and you'll find the more you practice communicating your needs, the more easy it will be to be confident to communicate your needs. And you'll get to the point where it's empowering. And honestly, people are kind of taken aback in a good way when you tell them what you need and what you want, because they view you as very assured of yourself, even if you don't feel sure of yourself. But the more that you practice it and choose to manifest it, the more it will come natural. So I just want to encourage all of you out there, regardless of the type of disability you have, like, don't be afraid to be awesome and to tell people what you need and what you want. And you'll find that when you're honest about it, what you need and what you want, people just view it as a very confident manner, and that can be really empowering. So,
and just to add on to that, I think it's more about loving yourself and accepting yourself for who you are. The moment you do that, because you are your number one company, and if you learn to enjoy your company with yourself, only then you can recharge that battery to then be there for someone else.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
I say that first work on yourself, make sure that you know what your needs are, you can communicate them, and then only you can actually start thinking about being with someone and sharing those things with them, and then that will have a healthy communication style, and then you can in a healthy relationship.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I could not be able to tell other and my husband what I need if I didn't know I needed myself first, just like you said, because I accept what I have and what I need and who I am. And I love who I am. So absolutely on that.
Thank you so much, Jess, for your time. And thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing everything. Thank you so much. And hopefully we will be in touch with you, possibly in the future, to collaborate on future things as well.
All right. Sounds great. It was great to see you again, Areej. And I hope to see you again virtually or in person someday. And thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for letting me join you as your guest. It was an honor.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, good night from the USA.
Good morning for Dubai.
Good night.